Just to be certain, you're not a witch.
No, I'm not a witch. And it's the most painful thing ever.
Hi everybody, we're talking to Nthombi Menze today, and she is a medical doctor and also an African traditional healer. Hi Nthombi.
Hi Avo.
Yes, we've met on a couple of occasions now, and we've had some incredible conversations. Firstly, just straight off the bat, what preconceptions that people have about traditional healing, traditional African healing, do you want to dispel?
Okay, that we are witches.
Okay, yeah.
I think there's a quite...
So just to be certain, you're not a witch?
No, I'm not a witch. That traditional healers are witches. We practice dark practices.
Yeah.
That we worship our ancestors. That we are carrying demons inside of us or with us. So those are the couple of misperceptions that we've been having, and I think it's a beautiful time. I think this era where we can actually fill up the gaps of knowledges that we all have about what African spirituality is all about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So great. So studied medicine first, didn't you?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you started practicing, and at the moment you're working in a mental hospital. That's fascinating.
I'm actually supposed to be a qualified psychiatrist.
Wow.
Yes. And that also has to do with the ancestral work as well. Because during the time that I was doing my training as a psychiatrist, a lot of the calling came in, you know. And I understand because they allowed me to finish school and to finish my internship and everything. I postponed it quite a bit, and we're not really supposed to postpone your calling. So I think that's where, because around 2017 I was meant to go and start I had a clear dream that I needed to go and start my calling journey, but I ignored that. I'm like, can I just finish this first?
Yeah.
I did my training as a psychiatrist, so that is another 4 years
it's another
training.
4 years. So you were nearly completed that.
Then late 2021, I had a clear dream that if you don't do your calling, my love, you might actually end up dying. Usually most people will get that information from other healers, when you go and consult and say, my dear, if you don't go for the calling now, something bad would happen. But I didn't have to consult. I was told by my own ancestors, if you don't go and do your calling, you will die. Basically, the Dlozi will kill you, which means the people that govern me will kill me.
Wow.
So I had to put down everything and say, I'm going to go to Mpumalanga and I'm going to go and do my calling, because I still have a 12-year-old daughter who's going to look after her if anything happens to me. So other people don't get the luck of being warned in advance. They just ignore and then they just die miraculously. So yeah.
Miraculously, hey. So
yeah.
with no
no warning. Yeah.
And no clear diagnosis.
No
as well.
clear diagnosis.
For me, my understanding of that, and excuse me if I'm wrong, because I had a similar thing. I was kind of on the wrong path, and then I just got very ill, you know. And then I was ignoring my calling because I'd kind of felt like I had this a calling. For me, it was with my rational mind. You know, my rational mind went like, no, you're actually just going against. It's like there's too much buildup of your subconscious. Like, actually, I don't understand it, to be honest. I don't understand how your soul can pull you one way and then your brain says, no, I want to go this way. And then all of a sudden there's this disconnect, and then you start getting ill, you know. Well, that's maybe a better way to understand it, is there's a disconnect of maybe your soul and your
purpose and who you are and where you're supposed to be.
Purpose, yeah.
Yeah, so that will cause a complete turmoil in your life.
Yeah.
So in my African spirituality sort of explanation, so remember we walk with Dlozis or ancestors or spirits, right?
Yeah.
So your spirit is aiming or yearning for this particular purpose that they did not fulfill when they were still alive, and they really want you to complete it, and you agreed before you were born that you are going to fulfill their purposes. So the more you don't follow that, it means your Dlozi or your spirit is becoming more and more in a discomfort.
Yeah.
So that discomfort of your spirit or your laws is going to manifest within your physique, right?
Okay.
And that would explain the depression. It will explain the unexplainable medical illnesses that a lot of our healers are getting, where doctors would do all tests under the textbook and they won't find any cause for a particular illness. And when they go to a healer, they'll say, you're actually having a calling. Once they start their calling, most of the symptoms disappear, or actually all of them disappear.
All right.
So that's one thing. Your spirit or your lozi is unsettled or becoming anxious or angry, and that will manifest within your body, whether it's mind, whether it's physique, etc. So that is why you are feeling this turmoil or chaos, because the people governing you that you meant to fulfill their purpose, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. It's and then
So in a way, it kind of, I mean, some people will say, some people will argue, they say but this is going against your own free will. Like, do you actually have free will then? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you...
So it shouldn't be a thing about being forced. There's one thing about laws is they don't enforce. Because remember, before we were born, or even conceived, we were spirits first, because healers believe we are spiritual beings going through a human experience. And there was a big meeting before we were born, and we were part of that, where we decided that, you know what, this is my journey, this is what I need to do. And I completely agree. Without being forced, you agreed that I am definitely going to fulfill my needs, or these particular needs or purposes on this planet Earth.
So it is your choice. It is your choice, but you're just not aware that it's your choice.
It becomes painful because the awakening process is very painful, right? So the turmoil or the dis-ease or the diseases or whatever that is manifesting physically is manifesting because it's an awakening to remind us, about our purposes that we had to fulfill on this planet Earth. And awakenings are always very painful.
Very painful,
very painful.
I got a friend of ours that has just completed a Sangoma course in the area of South Africa where I come from, and she was first diagnosed as having a mental disorder. She was quite young when she received her calling, and but now she's found out that she's, that was her calling. So she was taken aside and she was taught, and it's quite a nice way. I mean, it's a really nice way that, the way that it's done here in Africa is like, oh no, you've been getting these dreams and premonitions. Let's take you aside and teach you. Compared to the West, where people are just told that they're crazy, and then get put on heavy medication.
Absolutely. So I always explain to patients, and I'm getting to my Western colleagues as well, that we are, luckily in psychiatry, how we look at things is we are mind, body, we are spirit, biological. You'll hear psychiatrists speak a lot about biological, psychological, and social. And now we're entering an era where we're also adding spiritual as well. If you check our DSM-5, where we diagnose patients, you'll always see something that is related to culture. So you cannot diagnose somebody with a mental illness if it's in keeping with a cultural belief system.
Oh, I see. So they've actually included in the
they
DSM.
Included in the DSM-5 criteria.
The DSM-5 criteria.
So that is quite important. As much as we physical, we also understand that there's some also cultural syndromes that we need to also pay attention to and be open in terms of how that process gets healed as well.
What would your advice be to Western society where it's not, it was ruled out because of the witch hunt sort of from the 14 to the 1800s, which is only like, the 1800s was only 200 years ago. So there's a witch hunt where close to 50,000, when I say mostly women were burnt at the stake. And then it's just like everybody kind of, that has this sort of calling is just kind of labeled as, I mean, so that's amazing in South Africa, or in this DSM-5, it's got to do with cultural things, but it's definitely not part of a Western culture.
So I going back to that, there was a Witches Act They came about.
A Witches Act?
Yeah, Witches Act that came about those eras of our great-great-great-great-grandparents that couldn't practice their gifts, right? Because of the Witches Act. And that's why it was, even with our people, because I think now it also sort of brainwashed a lot of African people as well.
Made them scared.
In terms of their roots and who they are and African spirituality. Since the Witches Act, because people, even some of our black communities or families, they don't really believe in African spirituality. They will say, no, you guys are worshipping demons. It's not the right thing. Some families don't want to talk about it at all.
Yeah.
So it's a big taboo. Then you notice that some of our great-grandparents, in order to still practice their gifts, they went to church, right? And we call it isithunywa or prophet. So they would do their work within the church because in the Bible, there's still water. They speak about water. They speak about candles. So if anyone comes in my ndumba here and I have candles and water, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
But when I've got bones and mpepo and all of these things, it would have been a problem those days.
Back in those days.
So you'll see a lot of us healers wearing isithunywa gear, the prophet clothing, different colors depending on what your grandmother or your grandfather used in those days. So they would wear a lot of isithunywa clothing, is to acknowledge the isithunywa or the gogo that is walking with you, that practice their healing through that, to accommodate that era, basically.
I just smiled because when you said go, that's, So that means your grandmother, hey?
The grandmother, So most of us work with grandmothers and we call it ogogo.
Okay.
And some of us also have a mixture of ogogo, which is the grandmother, and omkhulu, which is the grandfathers.
Oh yeah, I was just smiling because your name means...
Nthombi Menze, enough girls.
It means enough girls.
Yeah.
Nthombi Menze means enough girls. Were you the last girl?
Last girl of, I think we were about 6 girls.
So you were the youngest of 6 girls.
Youngest of the 6 girls,
And Nthombi Menze means enough girls.
Enough girls, and then after me, 2 boys came.
Oh really?
Yeah.
So he named you as like a prophecy.
With a very good intention.
Yeah. Just like, okay, we've had 6.
Yeah, so this is enough. And then, we need the boys now.
Cool, that's interesting. And you told me that you've given talks about the correlation between Christianity and African spirituality. Do you mind expanding on that? Because I haven't really...
Because I think this also came about when I was doing my research. And I remember one of the prof asking me, so do healers believe in God? So we believe in a creator. Right? Whether you want to call it God, some people call it God, some people Allah, we call it Uvela Mngangi. So that is we believe there's a big creator, there's a creator out there that has given birth to all of us with beautiful intentions, right? Even before we see clients, we would pray to this creator to please be in alignment with what we're about to do, bring light, bring guidance, and all of that. So we do believe that there is a bigger force that is governing all of us, right? We do not worship our ancestors, which is a misnomer that most people think that we worship our ancestors. We appease them, almost like angels. They function. We take it as angels, that they are walking with God, especially those ancestors that were good people. Right? We call them the ancestors of light.
You were saying the last time you met, I think you said in 2017 or 2018, you said there was a lot of conflict going on. Is that what normally happens when somebody has a calling?
A lot of that has got to do with that awakening process, which is very unpleasant. When the time is now that you're being reminded of your duties on this planet Earth, it becomes a very painful journey. If you interview a lot of healers, you will hear really, really sad stories when the awakening was taking place. It's absolutely the worst. You wouldn't wish it to your worst enemy, basically. Lots of discomfort happening, not only within your physique and your emotions as well, but also your friendships, your relationship with things of this planet, your friendships, relationship with your family. People just suddenly leave you. You want to be on your own. Nothing just goes right. You fix one thing, the next thing, it's almost like it is horrific.
It just never ends. And that's what it was like for you?
It was like that. So that's why I tell people, ancestors don't bring chaos, right? Chaos happens automatically, but they will stand back and relax and watch you go through. And it's the most painful thing ever when ancestors are just quiet and watching you. You pray, "Oh, my dad, please come through. What's happening?" And they're just quiet. They're just watching what's happening in your life.
Because at the time, you nearly a qualified psychiatrist.
Yeah,
at the time,
and things are just not moving. So I'm going to tell you a story. I think when I was about to go to Epetlweni, to Mpumalanga, I went there. I didn't have money, right? I had to do a loan. Well, it was I was like, okay, you want me to go and do the calling, but you're not providing any money, right?
So you're now talking to God and the ancestors. Is that how you understand?
Yeah. So I need money to go and do the calling. So
money,
so you need to, because the process is very expensive. The trainings that take place in Mpumalanga is very, very expensive. Very, very expensive.
Oh, the Sangoma training.
It's very expensive. There's a lot of debate. We'll talk about it just now, about the debate about the fees that are expensive in terms of, about 200,000, even more sometimes. Yeah.
200,000?
Yeah.
So you've already studied medicine and you've probably got a student loan that you pay back. And then now you have to pay 200,000 for...
a loan for your African spirituality training as well. Very, very expensive.
Wow, I had no idea it was that expensive.
So I remember that afternoon I went to get a loan, APSA, and then they said no, they will give me 45,000 for the loan, and that is like a joke.
Yeah.
I was driving home that afternoon, I was like, I was talking to my aunt. I'm like, there is no ways you guys are providing me 45,000. You guys want me to do the calling, and it costs over 200,000. Please, guys.
Yeah.
And then the next day, the lady said, no, I'll give you 200,000 for the loan.
The very next day.
Very next day.
So did she contact you out of the blue? Or?
Out of the blue.
But you did say to the ancestors, you said, listen, you need a loan.
I need money. I need to complete your calling. Please provide me money. You can't provide me with 45,000.
Yeah.
So you always have to be that firm as well with your ancestors.
Okay.
Meet each other halfway. It's very, very important. It must be a give and take kind of relationship, not a one way. Yeah.
And that gets taught to you probably, well, you knew this before your training. Hey? So this is because I'd just say people in the West, when they sort of get some sort of vision, then they go, okay, well, I have to do this, whereas there is this give and take. I think it sounds like more so in the African tradition, because just give me a bit of the history. So obviously the white man came to Africa with Christianity, and then kind of almost outlawed a
lot of our customs, our rituals, our values. So
almost like the Spanish Inquisition, but not burning anyone at the stake. What advice would you give to someone, that's going through this, or someone from the West or someone from in Africa that, what advice would you give?
So as I've explained to everyone that comes to my Ndumba or my consultation room, they always have pure intentions and allow your ancestors to guide you at all times. Very, very, very important.
Yeah, the pure intentions, and that is a big thing. Hey, it's and that's in the Bible as well. It's like if you do have spiritual gifts, if you have spiritual gifts, as long as your intentions are pure, then
it's very, very important.
Yeah,
very important.
So it ties together, which is very interesting that Christianity does tie together. But there must have been a lot of suspicion, because on one hand they're bringing Christianity, and on the other hand they're enslaving people and sending them all over the world.
It was very interesting that time.
So there must have been a lot of suspicion and still a lot of doubt when it comes to it.
And still up until date, there's still a lot of doubts and suspicions and not trusting each other. It came with that era of slavery and, and slavery, colonialism, and all of those things.
Yeah. So that was because the Spanish Inquisition that spread over the whole of Europe, it was in Germany, all over the place. That ended, I think, in the late 1800s. So, and then it carried on then now in Africa when they so it was like if you didn't want to be a Protestant, which was like first they were Catholics and then they were Protestant. If you didn't want to be a Protestant, you got burnt at the stake.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just so why it's so. This really interests me is because they've done, and you being a medical doctor as well. This they've done tests on mice, okay, where they've removed mice from their parents when they're born, so they don't get licked by their mother, and they found that 3 or 4 generations later, the progeny or the children of those mice still suffer from anxiety, which means that it's kind of like an epigenetic thing, and everyone gets excited about epigenetics, but it gets passed on the
from
genes.
Generation.
So these fears about sort of this spirituality and having some sort of spiritual calling, and then talking about it is still in us. You know, it's very, very strong.
Yeah,
and it's kind of passed on from this colonialism time, where they called everyone witches, in Africa that was spiritual, and so we have naturally this fear, and in the West even more so, because like we don't have any acts in our DSM-5.
Exactly, it's like a very big elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And even in our culture as well, there's families we don't talk about healers. We don't talk about the calling. The trick is finding your purpose. It's sometimes very difficult for people to slow down, to get into meditation, to pray, to visit places that will bring them answers or bring them in closer connection with divine, or where you need to get your answers from. Nature is very important in order to get answers. Go to the beach, take a walk, reflect, meditate, go to the mountains, some of us will go to the caves, the rivers where you might connect better. I believe you can't go dirty to the beach or forest to go and connect with pure ancestors.
So you can't take your pizza with you?
Can't take your pizza with me.
No.
Yeah, so you go cleansing and then you go and connect so that you can get proper answers. It's just a distraction, and then later things will start clicking. Oh, this is what I was born to do, because you're now in alignment with nature, with your ancestors, with God as well, or your creator. I always say, make sure that whatever you do, especially when you're about to embark on a spiritual journey, that you have a solid relationship with your creator. It will make things much more easier for you. Your creator, and then you have a solid relationship with your angels and your ancestors, and then that will govern everything else in your life that is falling apart.
And your conscience as well,
conscience as well.
Is a large part of that. Like if you're living a lie sort of thing,
it's not
or if you're living an unauthentic life, then it's really hard to tap into your because you kind of got to sort that out first. I think that's what took a long time for me, because I was diagnosed as insane when I was 20 years old, so it was quite hard for me to live an authentic life. So I had to take care of that first before I could actually find out what my calling was. So that was really tricky. But anyway, let's put that aside. Thanks so much for your time, and you speak so well. You're very eloquent with the way that you speak. It's really humbling to listen to someone who can just speak without. It sounds like you really speak from the heart, and that it's like you're not even really thinking. It's just you're just allowing words to come out.
Thank you so much.
Which is a really, really good technique to have, and I really cherish that. And thanks so much for your time, and I'm sure a lot of people get a lot of help from this.
Thank you so much for inviting us. I would say Thokozani, meaning the divine in me, sees, embraces, and celebrates the divine in you. Wishing you a beautiful journey with your podcasts, and may it make a lot of difference and bring a lot of inspiration to everybody that will be watching it. It will touch the exact right people at the right time, whatever content you're going to be sending out.
Yeah, I hope so.
Definitely.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. What is that word?
Thokozani.
Thokozani, which the divine in me celebrates the divine in you.
Yeah.